January 17th, 1945. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. The snow fell in silence. It blanketed the shattered pines and the frozen corpses half buried in drifts that had turned pink with blood. The air smelled of cordite and wet wool, and the cold was the kind that made your teeth ache, the kind that turned breath into fog and fog into ice on your collar. In a shallow crater beside the remnants of a stone farmhouse, a lone American soldier sat with his back against frozen earth, hands bound behind him with rusty wire, watching 8 German soldiers argue over a tin of American cigarettes. He was laughing. Not loudly, not hysterically, just a low, steady chuckle that made vapor curl from his cracked lips. The Germans stopped talking. One of them, a Feldwebel with a scar running from his ear to his jaw, stepped closer and kicked snow onto the American's boots. "Was ist so lustig?" he spat. "What's so funny?" The American looked up. His name was Sergeant Benjamin Kuroki, though the men in his unit called him the Madman from Nebraska. His face was streaked with dirt and frost, his uniform torn at the shoulder, but his eyes were clear. He smiled wider. "You poor bastards," he said softly in English, knowing they wouldn't understand. "You have no idea what's coming." It was the 4th week of the Battle of the Bulge, Hitler's last desperate gamble to split the Allied forces and reclaim the initiative in the West. The Wehrmacht had punched through American lines with a ferocity not seen since 1940, sending entire regiments reeling backward into the frozen forests of Belgium and Luxembourg. For the young German soldiers of the 12th SS Panzer Division, it felt like the old days, like France, like Poland, when the world had trembled before their armor and their will. But this was not France. This was not Poland. The Americans they captured in those first days were not the demoralized, shell-shocked conscripts they had expected. They were well-fed. Their boots were new. Their rifles gleamed. Even their socks were dry and thick, made of wool that didn't rot in the wet. The German soldiers, many of them teenagers pulled from the rubble of bombed-out cities, had been issued paper uniforms and boots held together with scraps of leather. They had eaten sawdust bread and watered-down soup for months. They had marched through snow in socks stuffed with newspaper. And here, in the pockets of dead American soldiers, they found chocolate, chewing gum, tins of ham, cigarettes wrapped in waxed paper that didn't disintegrate in the rain. One German corporal, writing to his mother from a field hospital weeks later, would describe the moment his unit overran an American supply depot. "We thought we had entered a dream," he wrote. "There were mountains of food, coffee, sugar, canned fruit. We had forgotten such things existed. Some of the men wept." But Sergeant Kuroki, sitting in that crater with his hands bound, was not weeping. He was calculating.
The story of Benjamin Kuroki is not one that made the front pages of American newspapers in 1945. He was not a general. He was not a Medal of Honor recipient. He was a 31-year-old farmer's son from Hershey, Nebraska, a Japanese American who had enlisted in the Army Air Forces in 1941 and flew 30 bombing missions over Europe before being reassigned to ground infantry after his plane was shot down over France. He had landed behind enemy lines, evaded capture for 6 days, and rejoined Allied forces during the liberation of Paris. By the time the Bulge began, he had been in continuous combat for 19 months. He knew exhaustion. He knew fear. But more than anything, he knew how to read men. And the 8 Germans surrounding him in that crater were not soldiers. They were ghosts, hollow-eyed, starving. Their rifles were caked with ice. Their movements were slow, lethargic. One of them, a boy who couldn't have been older than 16, was shaking so badly he had to sit down. Another coughed wetly into his sleeve. the sound rattling in his chest like stones in a tin can. Kuroki had seen this before, in the Luftwaffe pilots shot down over England, interrogated in makeshift camps, in the SS officers captured near Caen, men who had once been fanatics but who now spoke only of food and warmth. The Third Reich was collapsing from the inside, and these soldiers knew it. But they were still dangerous, still armed, still capable of killing him where he sat, so he laughed. The psychology of laughter in combat is a phenomenon that military historians have studied for decades. It is not joy, it is not relief, it is a weapon, a signal, a form of communication that transcends language. When a man laughs in the face of death, he is saying, "I know something you do not," and Kuroki did. He had been captured deliberately. 3 hours earlier, his platoon had been pinned down by German machine gun fire in a tree line half a mile to the east. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running low on ammunition. The Germans were advancing in a slow, methodical sweep, clearing the forest sector by sector. Kuroki's lieutenant, a 23-year-old schoolteacher from Ohio, had been shot through the throat in the first exchange. Command fell to Kuroki. He made a decision. He ordered his men to fall back to a secondary position deeper in the woods, where they could regroup and call in artillery support. Then he stripped off his pack, his helmet, and his grenades, keeping only his M1 Garand and a single bandolier of ammunition. He walked out into the open, hands raised, and let the Germans take him. They searched him, found nothing, assumed he was a coward, a deserter. They bound his hands and dragged him back to their forward position, a shallow crater near the farmhouse where they had set up a temporary command post. They were waiting for orders, waiting for reinforcements, waiting for fuel that would never come, and Kuroki was waiting for them to relax. It took 37 minutes.
The Feldwebel with the scar ordered 2 men to stand guard while the others smoked and ate. One of them opened a tin of American corned beef, taken from a dead GI, and passed it around. They ate with their fingers, licking the grease from their palms. They spoke in low voices about the rumors they had heard, that the Americans were massing tanks in the south, that the British were moving artillery into position along the northern flank, that the Luftwaffe, what remained of it, was grounded for lack of fuel. One of them asked if they would be sent east when this was over, to fight the Russians. No one answered. Kuroki watched them, counted them, measured distances. The 2 guards were standing 6 meters apart, both facing outward, scanning the tree line. The others were clustered around the tin of beef, their rifles leaning against the crater wall. The boy who had been shaking was asleep, slumped against a shattered log. The man with the cough had removed his gloves to eat, his fingers raw and swollen with frostbite. The wire binding Kuroki's wrists was old, rusted. He had been working it loose since the moment they tied it, twisting his hands in slow, imperceptible circles. His fingers were numb, his shoulders burned, but the wire was fraying. And then it snapped. He moved without hesitation. His left hand shot forward and grabbed the nearest German by the back of the head, slamming his face into the frozen ground with enough force to shatter his nose. His right hand tore the knife from the man's belt, a standard-issue Kampfmesser, and drove it up under the rib cage of the soldier beside him, angling toward the heart. The blade went in silently. The man gasped once and collapsed. 2 seconds. The Feldwebel turned, mouth open, reaching for his sidearm. Kuroki hurled the knife. It spun once and buried itself in the man's throat. He fell backward, clutching at the blade, blood spraying across the snow. 4 seconds. The 2 guards spun around, rifles rising. Kuroki was already moving. He dove toward the crater wall, grabbed one of the leaning rifles, a Carabiner 98K, and fired from the hip. The first shot took the nearest guard in the chest. The second shot hit the other in the shoulder, spinning him sideways. Kuroki chambered another round and put a bullet through his skull. 9 seconds. The man with the cough was scrambling for his weapon. Kuroki shot him twice. The boy who had been sleeping woke with a scream and tried to run. Kuroki shot him in the back.
He dropped into the snow and did not move. 14 seconds. The last German, a thin, hollow-eyed man who had been eating moments before, stood frozen, hands raised, eyes wide with terror. He was saying something, pleading. Kuroki did not hear him. He fired once. The man crumpled. 17 seconds. Kuroki dropped the rifle and picked up his M1 Garand from where the Germans had tossed it beside the crater. He checked the chamber, still loaded. He scanned the tree line. No movement, no sound, just the wind and the snow and the bodies at his feet. He counted them. 8. But he had not been alone.
What the Germans did not know, what they could not have known, was that Kuroki's platoon had not retreated. They had circled. They had moved through the forest in a wide arc, using the snow and the noise of distant artillery to mask their approach. They had positioned themselves in a semicircle around the crater, waiting for Kuroki's signal. The signal was the first gunshot. When the Germans fell, 15 American soldiers rose from the snow like revenants, rifles leveled, and advanced on the crater. They found Kuroki standing in the center, breathing hard, surrounded by the dead. His hands were bloody. His face was blank. One of the Americans, a corporal named Jimmy Reese, stepped forward and stared at the bodies. "Jesus Christ, Sarge," he whispered. "How many?" Kuroki looked down, counted again. 8 here, 15 more in the trees. Reese blinked. 15? Kuroki nodded toward the forest. "When I opened fire, their support units came running. Your boys dropped them before they got close." Reese did the math. 23 enemy soldiers, 44 seconds from the first knife strike to the last rifle shot. He looked at Kuroki, then at the bodies, then back at Kuroki. "You're out of your goddamn mind." Kuroki wiped his hands on his trousers. "Maybe." The Americans secured the position and radioed for extraction. They stripped the German dead of weapons, ammunition, and any intelligence they could find. Maps, orders, identification papers. In the pocket of the Feldwebel, they found a letter. It was written in cramped, barely legible handwriting, addressed to a woman named Greta in a village outside Munich. One of the soldiers translated it aloud. The Feldwebel had written about the cold, about the hunger, about the way his boots had split and how he had wrapped his feet in cloth torn from a dead man's coat. He wrote that he did not believe in victory anymore. He wrote that he wanted to come home. "We all want to go home," the soldier said quietly, folding the letter and tucking it back into the dead man's pocket. Kuroki said nothing. The story of Sergeant Benjamin Kuroki did not end in that crater. He would survive the Bulge. He would survive the crossing of the Rhine. He would survive the final push into Germany and the liberation of the camps, where he would see things that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He would return to Nebraska in the autumn of 1945, to a farm that no longer felt like home, to a country that had interned his parents and siblings while he fought for its flag. He would live another 68 years. He would speak rarely of the war. He would tell his grandchildren only that he had done what was necessary, and necessity was a cold and unforgiving teacher. But the Germans who survived the Bulge, those who were captured, those who surrendered in the final weeks, would tell a different story. They would speak of American soldiers who were not like other soldiers, who fought with a strange, relentless pragmatism, who did not hate, who did not gloat, who simply did what needed to be done, and then moved on.
They would speak of abundance, of supply lines that stretched across oceans, of factories that never stopped, of a nation that could feed its soldiers chocolate and coffee while its enemies ate sawdust and snow. But more than that, they would speak of men like Kuroki, men who had been given a choice to surrender or to fight, and who had chosen, always, to fight. Not because they loved war, not because they hated the enemy, but because they believed, with a quiet and unshakable certainty, that some things were worth defending. Freedom, abundance, the right to go home. In the decades after the war, historians would analyze the Battle of the Bulge through 100 different lenses. They would dissect supply chains and troop movements. They would debate Hitler's strategic miscalculations and Eisenhower's response. They would write volumes about the cold and the snow and the courage of ordinary men thrust into extraordinary circumstances. But they would rarely speak of moments like the one in that crater. Moments that lasted less than a minute, but that contained in their brevity the entire arc of the war. The desperation of a collapsing empire, the resilience of a rising power, the laughter of a man who knew with absolute certainty that he was on the winning side of history. Not because he was stronger, not because he was braver, but because he had been fed, because his boots were dry, because his rifle worked, because behind him stood a nation that could afford to give its soldiers chocolate and coffee and wool socks and still have enough left over to rebuild the world. Epilogue. Somewhere in the forests of Belgium, beneath layers of snow and soil and 79 years of silent growth, there lies a rusted tin of corned beef. It was never finished. The men who opened it are long dead, their names forgotten, their graves unmarked or scattered across a dozen military cemeteries from Normandy to Berlin. But the tin remains, and if you were to dig it up, to pry it open and look inside, you would find nothing. No meat, no sustenance, only the faint metallic smell of a war that consumed 50 million lives and reshaped the world. Some wars are fought with guns, some with tanks, some with bombs dropped from the sky. But the war that mattered most, the war that decided everything, was fought with tins of corned beef, with wool socks, with dry boots and hot coffee, and the unshakable belief that a man who was warm and fed could do anything, even laugh in the face of death, even kill 23 enemies in 44 seconds, even go home.